Welcome back to another episode of making my own homemade trading card game. I know it's been too long since the last episode, but I haven't been sitting around doing nothing for that a bit of time, and I want to do this quick update to talk about all the changes I made to the game so far, to keep you guys up to date with what's happening. Without wasting any more time, let's get right into the changes. Right now on the screen I have a picture of what the cards used to look like before this little break I had, or well, this little, not a break because I've been working on it here and there, but let's take a look at the updated card layouts and templates. There you go. Um, it might be a little hard to see all the different changes that I made, but I think you can tell just as I click back and forth here that there are a couple changes, big changes made to each of the card types. And I'm not going to get into the changes in the template and design layout because although I think that will be an interesting video, I don't really want to waste your guys' time or bore you guys with that type of content. Right now we're talking about gameplay. So first things first, throughout a little bit of playtesting, I felt that dealing 4 damage static to your opponent is a good way to end the game. With small decks that I'm planning to use for the game, the game's going to go quick regardless, and so reducing the damage to a static 4 seemed pretty reasonable. And of course, there's 5 card types. Only one card type has been completely removed from the game and replaced, and that is the frame cards. They're the first card type amongst the 5 you see in this picture right now. They used to be a card that determined how much health you had, they would give you an ability, and they would determine when you would transform into your monster form. Now they've been replaced by a new card type called frozen form frame card types, and then there's also overheat frames, which are kind of your monster forms. Now, they're basically, what I meant is that what basically happened is I split the monster cards into 2 different card types, one for each of the different types of energies you're gonna balance throughout the game. So a better look at the difference in the card template is going to be here with Decapitate. I did the speed art for this on the channel, not the last video, I think the video before that, episode 8, I believe. So, as you can see, just the templates change completely. Sizes of different things have been shrunken to make room for more art or just for more pleasing layout overall. You can see here the only big change to these cards, and this goes for almost every card type again other than the frame cards and the monster cards, is the fact that they have this little added symbol here that is going to denote whether it creates heat or it creates coolant. And that's going to be another big change that I just introduced throughout this playtesting. This is what the old field used to look like, and this is what it looks like now. So as you can see, the biggest change right away is the fact that light and dark have been changed to heat and coolant. Your discard pile is now moved because I introduced a fourth pile to the game. So you have your deck, your discard, your stamina, which is your resources, and then your exhaust. The basic idea is that cards in your discard pile gets reshuffled and become a new deck when you deck out, and cards in your exhaust don't. They're kind of removed from game pile. There is some gameplay there is a little bit of play within that space, so cards can retrieve cards from the exhaust and recover them. But generally speaking, cards go to your exhaust means you're not getting them back. Cards to your discard pile means you can recur them. This makes it important for different effects. It allows me to give a little more space there to the abilities that allow them. So some ability might say discard a card, draw a card, right? But then another ability might say exhaust a card, draw 2 cards. So it allows me a little more mechanical play with that there. And then also I think it's helped speed up the game where I want it to be faster and slow down the game where I want it to be slower. The other zone you might have noticed is the support zone. Now, essentially, cards with the support ability will go into your support zone and they'll stick around and give you long-lasting effects throughout the game. As it is right now, that when your main sprite dies or is removed from play in any way, your supports all go with him. So, despite the fact that you can use supports to give a leg up on your opponent, they won't be around for the entirety of the game, not for the most part. The second big change I mentioned was heat and coolant, replacing light and dark. For most part, this is a thematic change. Light and dark really didn't fit with the theme of robots as much as I wanted it to, so I completely replaced it with the idea of heat and coolant. Now, this ultimately doesn't really have much effect on gameplay outside of the introduction of the overheat frames and the frozen frames. So essentially, if you gain too much heat, then you'll transform into your overheat form. And if you gave too much coolant, you'll transform into your frozen form, and you don't have a choice in the matter. So in the top left, you'll see the offset value, as I call it. And that means if I have this much more of one, then I have the other, I'll transform involuntarily. So if for example, in these two card types here, the two cards on screen, they both have an offset of 2. So if I have 2 more heat than I have coolant, I'll transform into my overheat form. And generally that may give me small advantages, but ultimately it's going to give me more disadvantages than advantages. Generally the overheat form will be more aggressive, and the frozen form will be more defensive, but at the same time both of them aren't really where you want to be in the game because they limit your options. That's the basic idea. Obviously with playtesting and tweaking, I'll sort of narrow that down and refine that into a more tangible effect of, wow, this gives me an ability, or gives me a boost, it gives me a buff, but I don't want to be here for the entirety of the game, ultimately because it's going to hinder my ability to win. Stance cards got a small change, and mostly in the form of how advantage and disadvantage works. So the basic idea is that you have a stance card, and you always have one in play, and they will have a stance zone type, and your opponent will have one as well, and there's like sort of a whole type circle, and one's good against the other type of thing. And before it worked, in which when you had advantage, all your cards get -1 to their stamina cost. I just simply changed that. But the introduction of the exhaust pile, instead of exhausting stamina to pay for effects, when you have advantage, you can discard it instead, which means essentially you're going to get that one step closer to outlasting your opponent rather than um, simply the other way around, which just makes everything cheaper, which first off, it limits my limits the space for abilities, because when every card in theory can be thought of as it can be one card, one stamina cheaper, it's going to make designing cards a little bit different. Now, the stamina cost is essentially the same. It just means that you do have an overall advantage over your opponent throughout the long game. Combat, for the most part, has stayed the same, but the big difference is how sprites work. As you can see here, the sprites card layout has changed quite a bit from the last time you've seen it. I don't think I really went over sprites that much in the previous videos, so this is a chance to explain how they're going to work. Essentially, when you play a sprite, for example, this sprite has a cost of 2. You take cards from your stamina and put it under the sprite, and that will be its stamina, that sprite's personal stamina. And the more stamina a sprite has, the stronger it gets. So if it has 1 stamina, it'll use its lowest value, and if it has 4 stamina, which is the maximum, it'll use its highest value. So, for example, in this one here, the Kylo has 3 stamina, so its stats will be 2 frontal power and 2 boost power. Another thing you can do is that with the introduction of stamina being on sprites, which sort of existed before, but I wasn't sure how much I wanted to lead into it. Now the elements, this is the really big part they play. So if you looked at before, when I looked at the 2 new card types, the big thing you might have noticed is that the elemental symbol, which was towards the top left, has been shrunken down to the bottom left. That's because I really downsized the impact the element had on the game, the material cost. But essentially now, when you play a card of the same element, you can actually spend stamina from a sprite of the element of the card you played. So that being an action, you can reduce the cost by spending stamina from your sprite instead of your own personal stamina. And you can also do this when playing other sprites. So a sprite can become cheaper with the introduction of using the sprite itself, another sprite, to pay for its cost. The biggest thing here is that every time, if you want to replace a sprite, because if you look at the board state, there's only 3 zones in play. You have your front, your attack booster, and your defense booster. So if you want to replace a sprite, since you only have 3 sprites available to you, what you do is that you take a sprite and you flip it face down, and that becomes a stamina, and you reduce the cost of the sprite you're playing over it by every stamina in that pile. So for example, this Kylo had 3 stamina on it, and you wanted to replace it with another Kylo for whatever reason, you would flip the old Kylo face down, and you put this new Kylo on top of it, and now this new Kylo would have 4 stamina on it because of the 3 that the old one had plus itself go under this new one. So this would be a 3 frontal power and 2 boosting power. So, talking about how heat works now in the new updated version of the game, essentially how it works is that every card, both sprites and actions, will have a heat or coolant cost. So when you play these as attacks or defense, or when you play these for actions, for example, when you play them as an attack or a defense, if you want to boost with them, you'll have to take a card from your hand and put it into the respective zone. So if you're boosting heat, you'll take a card from your hand and put it into your heat zone. If you're boosting stamina, frozen, or coolant, or if you're boosting with a heat card, you put a card from your hand to your heat zone, and even if you're defending with a heat card, you still put a card in your heat zone. But if the card had a coolant symbol, which none of these that I have on the screen do, then you put a card in your coolant zone. And so the more you boost, the closer you get to transforming into your form, which you don't necessarily want to do. But there's also other negative effects which comes from not having an equal amount of heat as coolant to regulate your mech or your robot. And that's essentially how the new updated form of the gameplay works. So I don't think there's really anything else I need to go over unless I'm forgetting or missing something, which is completely possible, but that's why I want to keep doing more regular updates so you guys know how things change and so you guys are up to date with any small mistakes that I made. So if I forgot something in this video, it's so easy to just tell you, hey, look, I forgot that in this video and the next video. I wanted to keep this series limited. I didn't want it to go on for too long, but now it seems like that's going to be the case. With the 10th episode being the original planned in for the series, and now it being essentially just the new beginning for how this new game is going to shape up, get excited because we're going to have to do a whole lot more episodes and show off a whole lot new cards, and you guys are going to help me out in that. Again, I want to give a huge shout out to everybody who comments and gives ideas, because I promise you guys, I don't get many comments. I read and I take into account almost every single one that I get. And so if you gave me an idea, know that I either play tested it, I put it in the game actually, if you notice it in the game, or that I simply, um, or that I simply, although I read it, just didn't really like the idea, and so I didn't use it. But the point is, I did read, and I do look at what your guys' suggestions are, so keep them coming. They've helped me shape the game into what it is now, which I'm really happy with moving forward. But that doesn't mean there's more ideas that you guys may implement that I'm going to appreciate and like. So that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you guys all enjoyed this video, because ultimately this is a small update video, not a lot is happening, but hopefully in the next video, episode 11, I'll do some playtesting on camera. I haven't done that since episode 5, and although I have done a whole lot of playtesting off camera, it's been a while, nearly forever since I really did some on-camera playtesting to show you guys how the game is currently playing in its current state. That being said, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Like, comment, subscribe to stay up to date with all the updates coming out for this new card game. That being this card game, this homemade card game I'm making, or the Godzilla card game, or any other card game I decide I feel like I want to cover in this channel. Stay tuned next week. Hopefully next week, the battle video or the playtesting video will be up to show you guys the current state of the game. Well, that's going to be all for now, but if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you guys go ahead and watch some of our other videos that we've made on this channel. Also, give this video a like if you thoroughly enjoyed it. And of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our future content. And I hope to see you guys back at the Roost.